Great, thanks. Testing, everybody can hear me? Good, perfect, excellent. So this is a panel on innovation in IoT. I think it's been very interesting that we've talked about a lot of use cases around 4G, a little bit even into 5G. We talked a lot about wireless broadband, and one of the interesting things is, okay, what do you do that? What are the innovation inflection points that are causing a lot of the utilities to decide that now's the time to investigate some of these? And then what are the capabilities that we're gonna maybe try and implement that would be more innovative in trying to do this? I think that this panel has some interesting approaches to what we can do, how we can do those things. And I'd like to start out by maybe doing some introductions. I think I'm just going to let the panelists introduce themselves. It's beyond my skill set to effectively introduce that many people and do it gracefully. So my name is Ken Rabedeau. I work for Nokia. I'm the head of the utility segment for Nokia. I'm also a board member here at UTC, proud to be a member of UBBA. And I throw that out there. So maybe Jitender, if you want to go first, and we can just go down the line and let everybody introduce themselves.
Sure. Can you hear me? Yep. So Jitender Vohra, I'm the Director of Carrier Relations and Marketing at Tellit. So I have like 28 years of wireless experience. Most of that was with Motorola, where I was responsible for the public safety LTE, private LTE systems. And then about a couple of years ago, I decided to kind of round out my career by coming to Tellit, where I play more in the module device space. And then basically here I have one of my main jobs at Tellit is to interface with all the MNOs from Verizon, T-Mobile, UScellular, AT&T, Rogers, Bell. So I do alignment of our roadmaps, when it comes to future technologies and certification, things like that. So I'm really plugged into those type of details. So I think my company Tellit has been in the utility space for a long time, 20 plus years. So I think we're positioned very well to kind of help everyone here as we transition to the digital transformation that's happening here. So I think I look forward to building the relationship with all you guys and bring our solutions to this space. So I look forward to I guess partnering with you guys all as we go on.
So thank you. My name is David Allen. I'm the Director of Emerging Technologies at UScellular. I have 30 years of experience in the telecom space. I've been historically on the vendor community with Motorola, Qualcomm, Samsung, companies like that. More recently, I transitioned to the operator space. So formerly with AT&T IoT business unit, and currently Director of Emerging Technologies at UScellular. Really kind of our, UScellular, if you're not aware of who we are, we're the 4th largest wireless carrier in the United States. And, really our mission and vision and being a part of the UBBA is that we view ourselves as complementing a utility's private network initiatives. We're not here to compete. We think that it's a cooperative arrangement, and we're here to complement that initiative.
Thanks, David.
I'm Adam Nathan. I lead Worldwide Technologies utility and energy practice. Worldwide Technology is the largest privately held minority-owned business in the country. We are a systems integrator that works with many of the large IOUs and munis to implement technology across the IT/OT spectrum. And so we have been partnering using our lab facilities to support the events at the Plugfest with the Cisco core in our lab. We help go from idea to outcome, from business case through testing, deployment, and training and turning it over, and really are thrilled to be a part of this.
Thanks, Adam. Jeff Tufts, responsible for Cisco's utility practice. Ken and I used to work together many years ago, and now we hang out in the octagon and see who comes out alive. So, as I said this morning, Cisco's perspective is, we're one of the founding members with Nokia and Anterix and some others and so forth. And so, as I said this morning, our mission really is to hopefully try to connect and secure both the enterprise side as well as the operations side. So I think we're ready to begin.
Thanks, Jeff. So let's get this panel started. So we have expectations. So two things. We expect everybody that just had lunch is just going to try and take a nap. But every once in a while, we may try and slip some questions into the audience just to see if anybody's paying attention, or talk about watermelon growing or something just to see if you're actually paying attention to what we're doing. But I think that maybe to start off, we can start off with some ideas to kind of frame, what is innovation in IoT for utilities in this space? How do we use some of the technologies to enable building this out? And I'm going to start with Adam and maybe pick on him first and just ask a generic question. What's driving innovation in the utility space for IoT at the moment?
Absolutely. So, I think we all agree more is changing than staying the same in this space. Where, how, and by whom energy is made, the demand is changing, the profile of our customers is changing, with residences getting buying equipment that's more efficient, but also moving cars to electric, and fleets, electric fleets being built up. Just the transition is happening on all facets of the business. At the same time, there's pressure on the industry from outside for the first time in 100 years. It's coming in the form of patents we're seeing from even the Walmarts and Amazons that are touching this space. Folks like Tesla who would love to own that, and then even the devices going in where, I think one of the use cases we'll all talk about is AMI, using AMI to understand what's going on behind the meter and being able to inform customers of their use. Well, we're not, this industry isn't the only one that wants to do that, and that's led to investments by Google and others to try to take in, that space. So all of that, and then I'll add to that, there's new opportunities. So with this kind of infrastructure, we heard the session yesterday on rural broadband, that opens up a lot of opportunity. The fiber is just more and more needed by society, and we also see really interesting innovation. Like Ameren is doing some testing using excess capacity from wind to power Bitcoin mining, to store that as economic value, because otherwise they can't use that power. So that's an interesting way to grab value from a capital investment to offset the cost elsewhere, that otherwise, the whole business model is changing, and that requires vastly more information about what's going on the grid, from the meter back through generation and the variety of generation that's happening, and then all of the testing we've had here around FLISR, and the demand and the requirement for reliability is continuing to grow, and supporting these new opportunities and rebuffing the encroachment by other industries and other companies will require that insight, and ultimately you can't get that visibility without sensors, networks, and data that make up the IoT.
Good point. Maybe at this point, I don't know if anybody else on the panel has anything to add or expand on.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add some additional comments there. So agree with everything that was just said, but some of the things that have been demonstrated here at the Plugfest, all the access to spectrum. You got 900 megahertz. You got CBRS spectrum. You got carriers licensed spectrum, like from UScellular and the other operator that was here. You're showing these live demonstrations using all three of those spectrum bands, here at this show. So that's driving innovation. And, now we're seeing not only LTE, but also at the Plugfest, there's been live demonstrations with LTM. And so as you see LTE, LTM, Narrowband IoT, and 5G, you're seeing this roadmap that's being built towards innovation within IoT, within the utilities.
Good points. Anyone else want to add any pieces?
Sure. I guess we have a little different perspective from Tellit. So we've been kind of innovating in the wireless space for some time, and now we've also been supporting global carriers around the world. So we've been also investing a lot of R&D towards innovating this technology. So I think it's going to be a great thing for the utilities to leverage. So the smart grid is one of the biggest parts of the utility industry that's kind of benefiting from the availability of cellular technology. So I feel this is going to really propel a lot of the availability of this technology being so well understood, so robust, and so well tested. So this should really accelerate the pace of the innovation on the supply and also the solution side. So I truly believe this is like a game changer, and the timing is right for all of us to kind of leverage this in the utility space.
Excellent, thanks. All right, so maybe I'll move forward a little bit. I think maybe David will ask this one since you're from UScellular. We've had some discussions, sometimes passionate, sometimes a little bit about, in order to take advantage of some of this innovation, look at the new use cases that are coming out, the new applications that are being built. The question comes up, do utilities have to build all the components of an IoT network at the same time? Can they take a phased approach? Or is it all in one big bang, as it were?
Yeah, so, there was a thought leadership session yesterday that was talking about investment and private cellular networks. You have your classic up and to the right slide, which which everyone tends to like. But, it's a balance between investment and ownership. And, you can go all in, and if you have the capital, you can build out your private cellular networks. You can build out your RAN coverage. You can own and operate and control your own IMSI range. And so that's the ultimate goal. And the cellular carriers there to support that as well. But also, there's a range of other options, whether it's, I think it was said is a UVNO, was the first time I heard it yesterday, a utilities virtual network operator. Maybe a utility can invest in the core network and own and operate the life cycle of their devices that way, but still leverage the commercial carriers' radio networks, right? So they don't have to build all those towers and all that backhaul. And there's even a scaled back version from that where you just want to do localized data and let the carrier own and operate the network, but allow the data to stay local to the utilities network and not traverse the open internet. So there's a range of investment options and ownership control that are available. And by picking any one of those solutions, if you want to start with localized data, if you want to evolve to an MVNO or UVNO model, I should say, and then ultimately get to total control of a network plus a RAN plus IMSIs, picking a solution doesn't lock you in. You can grow as that capital investment becomes available to you.
Good points, thank you. Anybody else want to?
I just said there's no silver bullet.
Yeah.
There's no one answer that solves all of this for everyone. And so I think figuring out what are the right, and nothing happens all at once, right? These are years long deployments. So to your point, even if ultimately where you want to get to is a Southern Link type deployment that covers multiple states, your entire service territory, even then they're either parts of it won't be available or it'll take you several years to. I see Alan in the crowd. It'll take you several years to get there, and the use cases are now. So I think and the technology will continue to evolve. And I think owning it allows you to own that life cycle a little more. There's some benefits, but it's just having the ability, but going into it knowing this is a multi-solution, a multi-network. The solution will have to be multi-network at the end of the day.
Yeah, good point.
One caveat to that, yeah, is that I do think, and this is, I think this summit is evidence that this is happening. In the past, the networks I don't want to say it like we're going from one multi-network environment to another, and that's not important. The change that's happening is that previously those networks were built for a project, for one use case, and not for a collection of needs. And so I think now the way we've been, in our conversations with utilities, the focus is building for locations and coverage rather than for a specific project where you're having, multiple networks all in the same place that are often redundant. So I think it's a more comprehensive, but also sort of looking at it in a more comprehensive and collective way.
That's a really good point. I'm not sure I thought about the difference in how you deploy, coverage versus that's an interesting call out. But one thing that I'd add to the conversation is there are some really compelling use cases that are that utilities need to work through today. So for example, there's a compelling ROI with voltage optimization. There's certainly going to be troublesome feeders that are going to need devices that go out there today. And to the earlier point, this takes time to do. And so I think, circling back to innovation and I don't know that this is settled yet, but I think there's an opportunity for vendors and certainly utilities to challenge the vendors of what is the best way to continue to deploy the use cases that need to be deployed today, knowing that I eventually would like to build a private network. What's the best way to do that without stranding an investment that you might put out there, or to at least eliminate a truck roll to put a SIM, for example? So I think there's an area, there are certainly innovative ways to do it, but I'm not sure we've consolidated as an industry as the right way to do it, so.
Right, certainly best practices to be developed around how to optimize that. Jitender, do you have anything?
Yeah, just a couple of things just to add to that. Yeah, I think everyone should put together, especially the big utilities, blueprint of the long-term plan to get to full control, right? So that you do that, and then you kind of phase it in amongst the years. But the good thing is today you have a very robust LTE ecosystem that you can leverage. So you can start off with NB-IoT or LTE-M, and then slowly migrate to 5G, let it be SA or NSA. The good thing is LTE-M and NB are 5G ready also. So it's not like LTE long-term evolution, you get that. So that's one of the things you can evolve from LTE-M and NB-IoT to 5G.
Perfect. I think actually maybe we could build on that a little bit. I think, and maybe even I'll just pick on you since you were talking to just continue along that line. So what would be the main innovative IoT applications that you can expect in the energy segment over the next few years as a vendor in this space? You probably have an opinion on what you need to support, right?
Yeah. So bottom line, when it comes to the, energy is no longer about having power plant that energy generates, and then you need to distribute it to different households. Right now you have homes, you have cities, they're becoming smarter and smarter. So bottom line is from a application perspective, we see a lot of renewables such as solar and electric chargers, smart street lighting connected to the grid, smart cities, just to name a few. Again, I think those are some of the ones that we're starting to see early on. A lot of adapting to LTE-M. We've also seen it back here during the Plugfest, and also like Cat4.
Perfect. I don't know, anybody else on the panel want to maybe expand on that a bit?
The morning sessions were really good. And I took some notes from yesterday and today, and I heard some really interesting features and use cases that I'd like to just share. Omar from San Diego Gas and Electric talked about the falling conductor and how, from detection to action needs to really occur within 50 milliseconds. Very interesting use case. The lone worker use case, man down use case. That's been around in the commercial carriers networks, but it's putting sensors in the hard hats and the vests and things like that are really important. I love this next feature. Joe of Evergy and Gil of Ameren from this morning, voice. What a cool feature of just having voice, right, within the IoT data network. And to be able to talk to utilities from one utility to the other utility. And so carrying voice over a data network, which we all commonly refer to as VoLTE or voice over LTE, is a really key feature that we tend to overlook a lot of times. And so I find those to be old but new again.
Good point. It's kind of right data in the right place at the right time was the message behind that, if I remember correctly. It's a good piece. I don't know, Jeff, you wanted to?
I was just going to add, it's probably not the most exciting, and it's the first IoT use case I think we had in the industry, but I think it's on the verge of changing, and that is just simply the meter, right? So if you go in, I think LNG is here, and see what their meters can do versus, it's almost, you can almost project out some of these use cases that we want to build out may actually just be incorporated in the meter.
Yeah.
So, it's the early days of the iPhone when there was one application. I mean, that's essentially the meter now as an application host. And so right now we have, Bricklayer and, I don't know, Solitaire on the meters, but it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next 10 years, I think.
Meter as a platform, there you go.
Pong.
Yeah.
No, I think as we, and sort of the how behind that, I think is where a lot of those require the data side. We're here talking about the network, but I think as one area where I feel like people struggle in innovation is that we'll tackle the network and we'll work through the nuances of the network, or somebody in innovation will look at the individual device and look at options for a device or a meter, and what can the meter do? And then somebody else is playing around in a data center with the data somewhere, but tying that all together. And that is one of the cool things about having the ecosystem we do here is we have vendors and utilities together that cross all three of those, and cybersecurity across all of it, to make sure that we're not just deploying networks to have networks, and you don't just put a meter on a home to have a meter, but we actually are testing the end-to-end solutions. And so I think this is foundational to all of that.
Good points. Good points. Thank you. So I think, Adam talked about what is driving the innovation in IoT, and David talked about, what are the approaches to building all the parts? How do you space it out? When do you decide to bring them in? Jitender talked about what do the innovative applications look like coming in over the network, and how do they get brought in? One of the things maybe we didn't talk about yet is how do you scale all of that? And maybe if you're a utility that wants to take advantage of some of these new automations, you want to take advantage of this digitized applications that are now mostly being deployed in the distribution grids. You're talking about tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of types of devices. So maybe Jeff, I'll pick on you since you brought up that topic earlier. Yeah. Maybe we could look at what are the challenges to scale some of these innovative IoT applications?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because, oftentimes we talk to clients and they're very focused on and rightly so. Everyone's got their job. I have a recloser. I just need to connect the recloser. Yeah. Or I'm the voltage guy. I just need to get this data back. I need to get a waveform back. And so there is a moment to pause and look at it holistically to say, well, when Joe gets his reclosers in Ohio up and Jane gets her voltage centers in Missouri up, and you add it all up together, oh my gosh. And so I think there's some clear ways to go about this, but some of it, like the earlier point, is a little bit unsettled science or approach or consolidated approach. So I think there's a blend. Certainly anyone that puts out something at large scale that's remote, that isn't the utility, thinks, oh, cloud, right? Let me just put this device that plugs on, it auto registers and the wonders of the internet and the man in the cloud type of thing, right? But certainly there's use cases, perhaps across every use case, but there's certainly some use cases you wouldn't expect that you'd want to go to the cloud either for registration or have the data and control plane go there. So I think there's a balance between the cloud certainly is easier, comes with OpEx, but it also has some perceived security concerns. And so if you're looking about, what is the right way to do it in-house, and from a Cisco standpoint, just networking, large-scale networks, you think automation. And I think we agree on that point, Ken, where
Absolutely.
There's certainly the technology that exists to deploy very large-scale networks, as they do exist, and those folks tend to look at a variety of automation techniques. So I think there's a place here for automation. There's a number of different approaches to that. Some of them are still being innovated because there's certain things you can't do when you're on a lower band network or a lossy network that you can't do with a heavy-handed approach on fiber. And so I think as vendors, we continue to automate, but if you're keeping everything in-house, I think some sort of in-house automation, software defined, those types of automation engines, zero touch, all the buzzwords and so forth. But I think there's still work to be done. I think every vendor has an approach, but I think we're going to continue to approach it as the customer base challenges us.
Yeah, to your point, I think if you want to, another panel touched on this briefly. I remember it earlier. If you want to sift through that volume of data from that volume of devices, some type of automation or filtering to get through that is probably going to be the only way to successfully do it. It's not going to be manual anymore.
And I think it's about lowering the barrier to entry.
Yep.
Right? That's so much, having your own private network means that barrier cost of the OpEx of having that added device on the network is taken away. And so that's one barrier. Another is, to your point, if you have to make a request of IT for that data every time and it's a custom request, it takes 6 months to never before you get what they think you wanted. And then when you get it, you don't have a scalable environment to do the analysis. You're doing it on laptops. There's so much in the data side of it as well that can be, by structuring it right, getting the right governance and the right buy-in across the organization, you can really drive the time to innovate down and the time to figure it out, the R&D cycle, and then the time to actually get it in production and keep it up. So I think the network is a key part of that, and the automation in the deployment. We were talking about that earlier. If you can get, if you can get that UE or the RAM, or if you can get the UE to be deploy with zero touches or one touch, then you're eliminating so many parts of the cost, not just the time of the individual, but the support, the training, right? There's so many of those, the inevitable re-truck roll because there's issues or they don't, the training didn't stick. So there's just so many cycles to that you cut out in a lot of ways if you can drive automation and put those sort of guardrails on that enable that growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps another, viewpoint of scale also is, as the utilities are going from hundreds of devices and endpoints to thousands of devices and endpoints to potentially millions of devices of endpoints, is putting the right services on the right technology, right? Those devices and services that need high bandwidth, you put them on LTE. For those devices and services like we just saw in the demonstrations before our panel that can sleep for long periods of time, put them on narrowband and LTM, right? Within the narrowband specifications, as it evolves to 5G, the objective is to have massive IoT, to have 1 million devices per square mile. So that's how you can help drive scale with technology. But you can also help drive scale with your partner ecosystem. And so I think it was brought up earlier today and yesterday that it's the partner ecosystem that'll really help drive scale. So you want to leverage your vendor OEM community like the Cisco's of the world. You want to leverage your vendor partner community like the device partners of the world. And you want to leverage the experience that a mobile network operator has as well, as they've gone from a few hundred to a few hundreds of millions of devices on their network. So leveraging that partner ecosystem is really important. And that's, I think John Hughes said it well. That's really what this UBBA is all about, right?
It is indeed.
Is driving a common voice of the utilities back into the community so they have scale of purchase power and scale of influence.
Yep, exactly.
And system integrators as well.
Didn't mean to.
Yeah, I think everyone kind of touched upon the same thing, but we're kind of working on our next generation solutions for, onboarding, maintaining and managing. So we have like device management solutions, and we also have platform solutions to kind of gather all the data, make some decisions with that. So we're working on the next generation solutions for these things.
Yeah, those are good points. I think, that kind of drives home, those of you who were here on the first day to hear Bhavani speak, she talked about, how innovation is great, all these new applications, the new ways of adopting the technologies, using the technologies to enable it. But then the next hard piece is, do the hard work after you already did the hard work. And that's how do you execute on it? How do you scale it? I think that all of these points that the team made are good. Maybe since there's just a few minutes left, maybe we could open it up if anybody has any questions here that they want to ask of the panelists. Yeah, we put them to sleep, yes. That after lunch nap.
Watermelon.
Hi, John DeZalo, National Grid out of Boston. One of the challenges is lack of spectrum options, right? There's not a whole lot out there to choose from.
Indeed.
Especially for LTE 1.4 minimum channel size, right? But there are some options and some choices out there for utilities that would be suitable enough for narrowband. Does it make sense to build a standalone narrowband network? And if so, is that suitable for business critical communications? like distribution automation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know, does any of our
Oh.
panelists want to take first shot at that?
I'll take a first shot at that. So there are a lot of spectrum options though that are becoming available. So you have 900 megahertz, you have CBRS, you have the commercial carrier networks that all have their spectrum, and using those together and combining them for the utilities purposes is really kind of what this plug test was meant to show. So that's one aspect of an answer. LTE versus narrowband, and I think even reference 1.4 megahertz, so that would be kind of an LTM bandwidth size. The commercial carriers have deployed all three, right? And they've deployed LTE, LTM, narrowband, and that's also been deployed globally as well. And I think you see different uptakes of it. Narrowband is unique in that it takes a very small amount of bandwidth, 200 kilohertz of bandwidth, so it fits nicely with the old GSM technology, if you recall that, that's heavily used in Europe. But it also poses some challenges too. It doesn't have quite enough bandwidth to support FOTA, firmware update, software update, which was referred to by Anterix a little bit earlier in the demos. It's a little bit challenging on roaming. It makes it a little bit harder. And the ecosystem isn't quite as robust just yet. So, narrowband has a place in the world, but I wouldn't want to put everything on narrowband. It has some challenges, and so it needs to be balanced with a broader band LTE type technology.
And I would just dovetail on that. So, I think there's momentum to attempt to consolidate utility networks. I think we saw it in the wireline side where we used to have 5 networks that went into a substation and we consolidated it on one. And I think we see that there's that trend on the wireless side. Now, there's some reasons for that trend, but doesn't mean we can't continue to build individual separate networks. And it's going to take more than one type of network. And so I think if we pause and say, why is there such momentum about consolidating all the diverse networks, the disparate networks that are supporting a utility into attempting to do it into I think Ameren goes 18 to 1, right? Roughly 18 networks into one, give or take. There are some upsides, but if you simply can't get to a place, you simply can't get there. And so you're going to need to complement it. So I think there's the moment to pause to say, why is that consolidation happening? Why are so many utilities wanting to do that? But from a technical standpoint, to the earlier point, if we're putting devices on locations that, we've seen what NERC does where, regulations, I can never remember if we're calling them bulk now or high and medium, but the stuff that used to be high, now we see regulation from high making it to medium, and medium potentially making it to low and so forth. So if we get to a point where these use cases are governed by something like that, and a modem manufacturer, a router manufacturer, whatever it is, comes out with a known vulnerability, and you have to upgrade that device, that could be potentially really problematic and expensive. So it's just a niche point that you brought up that, 10, 15 years ago, 30 years ago, if you wanted to put a low band device up, all it had to do was work. And now we sort of have to keep in mind around the operational piece of it. And if we have to upgrade it, can it actually be upgraded? And if it cannot be upgraded, depending on the use case that it's supporting, do you have to actually replace it? So it's a very little niche use case, but it's probably just something to keep in mind. But I would answer yes, you can certainly, I think most utilities have some narrowband and continue to deploy some use cases, particularly on their more rural areas.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Go ahead.
add one thing from my perspective as I deal with the MNOs in North America is we've had modules that do dual mode CADM and NB for over a year now, and they've been very successful, but most people are using it as a CADM perspective. NB has really taken off in Europe and in South America, but in North America, and none of the operators have really talked about NB taking off yet, although we're in the process of starting to do certifications for NB only low-cost modules now. But I think the demand for that will come in the next few years, but it's not there right now in North America.
All good points. Any other questions? Any other perspectives on that? Awesome. And we get to finish 1 minute early.